history shows that when countries get overextended, either economically, militarily, politically, whatever, they usually peak and go into decline. I'm not talking in my opinion. This is a simple historic fact.
Mm-hmm.
100 years ago, Britain was the richest, most powerful country in the world. There was no number two. 50 years later, it was bankrupt, literally bankrupt. The IMF had to bail out what had been the richest, most powerful country in the world. Go back in history. It has always been changing, and it always will. When countries get overextended, they usually wind up in decline. We had the longest bull market in American history, starting in 2009. Things were great in the U.S. That's the longest in American history anyway. It doesn't mean it can't last 40 years, but it never has. Countries always when things are good for a while, people get overextended, they get overconfident, they think it's new investors come in, new investors call their friends and tell them, oh, I've discovered this new thing called the stock market. It's so much fun and you can make money and it's easy. It's easy to make money, and that's always happens at the end of bull. It always has happened. It's happening again. Things get overextended, things get expensive, and we always have a bear market. This is not the first time this has happened, David. What I said before, they should only put their money where they themselves know a lot about where they're putting their money. Otherwise, when things go wrong, you don't know what to do. And things probably will go wrong again. You mentioned the 70s. David, we had big inflation in those days, and as you point out, it's worse now. In 1980, the interest rate on United States government treasury bills was over 21%. That's not a typo. They had to raise interest rates what would be extremely high now in order to kill inflation. Interest rates are nothing compared to 21% now. So if we're going to solve this problem, we're going to have to face a lot of pain. Do I like it? No, but I have to deal with facts. Less than 2 years ago that the Federal Reserve was saying there's not going to be inflation. And then they said, oh, it's temporary. Don't worry. This is transitory. These guys don't know what they're doing. Most central bank officials or bureaucrats or academics, they don't know how the world works. They just want to preserve their job. But you said they've raised interest rates. Sure, they have. But I repeat, they were 21% on treasury bills, short-term treasury bills last time around. So no, we're going to have a lot of pain before we solve this problem. No, the biggest risk of the central banks, not just the Federal Reserve. The guy in Japan has said, he will print his word unlimited amounts of money, and he does. Goes to work every day and prints as fast as he can. We have a lot of central banks doing things like that. Therein lies our problem. Whenever you have a lot of money printing, it distorts markets, it distorts inflation, it distorts interest rates and gigantic debt. In 1980, America was a creditor nation. We were still a creditor. Now we're the largest debtor nation in the history of the world. Big things have changed since then, but not for the good, at least not as far as an American, which I am. No, I see what's happening. There was no there was still Red China then. There was still Soviet Union then. A lot of huge things that have changed in the world. I always would just look for cheap things to invest in. I didn't care about where they were or what they were. It never occurred to me. I thought everybody did that. I would find markets that were cheap and I would invest in them. Some of them were considered strange. I can remember when Germany was considered strange to American investors. But I was just looking for cheap places, cheap things, and I would invest in them. Then people heard about it. They said, oh my gosh, you must be crazy. But they kept working. And so people said, oh, he's Indiana Jones. He goes to places where the people don't go and looks for adventure. Yes, I did look for adventure in my own life as well, but also in my investing life. But it wasn't looking to have a name. It was just looking for something cheap. And whether we like it or not, the 21st century is going to be the century of Asia and the century of China. 40 years ago, there was no China. Now it's the second largest economy in the world, et cetera, et cetera. There are gigantic changes and prosperity taking place in Asia. And I can look out the window and see it. Anybody who doesn't know about it can just look out the window or come to Asia. You'll see. It's astonishing the changes that have been taking place. But you know, the same thing happened in England in the early 19th century. Astonishing changes took. Look at America. You know, America was absurd 150 years ago. People thought it was a joke. They quickly learned that America was an astonishing success. A lot of the money is flocking to Asia, as you probably know. China's got the largest foreign currency reserves in the world. Japan is number 2. Korea has huge numbers. Many Asian countries have staggering amounts of assets that they have built up. So people's money is coming to Asia, but also some immigration, nothing like it was in America in the 19th century or even the 20th century. But no, people are, I live in Singapore now, and I see more and more foreigners all the time. Somebody's coming, not just with their money, but with their bodies as well. It is certainly happening. It has certainly happened, as I said, in the last 40 years. There are astonishing changes that have taken place and continue to take place. And, you know, the United States is the largest debtor nation in the history of the world. I don't like that, but it's a fact. I have to deal with that. 40 years ago, America was still a creditor nation. So changes are taking place, and the world, if you want to be successful, you have to recognize changes and adapt to those changes. Do I like the fact that America is the largest debtor nation in the history of the world? No, I have 2 teenage children, but those are facts, and we have to deal with that. If you said to most people in America, where do you want to go? They would say America. Where do you want to invest? They would say America. But that's because most people still don't know the facts, just as many people did not know the facts about the UK or about other countries that peaked and went into decline. Yes, no, America's great. We've got great PR, great movies, great TV, great lots of things. But that does not mean that beneath the surface there are not serious problems developing. David, I said I have teenage children. I don't like it. It's a good time to be an old American. It is not a good time to be a young American, in my point of view. We should cut spending with an axe. No, with a chainsaw. You know, we have this gigantic debt, and it gets higher every day. We should cut spending. We should start reducing our debt. Are we going to do it? Of course not, David. Come on. If you ran on a policy in Washington, maybe you would get elected. But after a short time, people would say, wait a minute, this is very painful. We don't want to do this anymore. Nobody likes pain, even if they know what's good for you. So no, is America going to do it? No. I mean, I wish we would, but I know simple facts. History is pretty clear that we've had many, many wars in history. There was a study recently of American history. America's been around since 1776. In every year except 15 of those years since 1776, America's been at war somewhere. Do I like that fact? Do I like that statement? Of course not. But we, for whatever reason, I should say Washington, for whatever reason, seems to like war. So there's a very good prospect. You see what we did in Ukraine. We jabbed the Russians as often as we could. You see what we're doing in Taiwan. I mean, Nancy Pelosi flew to Taiwan. I mean, she must want a war to fly to Taiwan to jab the Chinese in the face. You know, why do you have to do that? Let's try to solve problems, not aggravate problems. I have had investments in defense at times in my life. I don't think I have many now, if any. But no, certainly if we're going to be have war, military companies will do very well. They always have. I don't think I have any investments in that sector right now. Maybe the problem is it's very rare in history that everybody has known that a recession is coming. You know, this is the most broadcast and most forecast recession that I've ever seen in my life. And knowing that most people are usually wrong, I would say we're probably not there. It depends on where you're talking about. But for instance, China has been closed. Now China is opening up. That's going to give a big boost to the world economy because they are the second largest economy in the world. So I would not be surprised if there is not a recession yet. I expect it certainly to come. You know, David, I'm sure you know, you're a kid, come. The third year of a presidential cycle in American history has usually been a good year in the American stock market. You know, and this is year 3 coming up. And the reason that happens is politicians try to spend a lot of money preparing for year 4, the next election, so they can get reelected. So I would imagine that things are really better than we read, just because the world doesn't work that way. If everybody knows something, it's usually wrong.